Hi everyone, it's Audrey Thompson, the Residency Director at Breastfeed Atlanta, and I'm excited to talk to you about compliant communication in the age of HIPAA. And while compliance and HIPAA doesn't usually inspire excitement, in this case it does because it is one of our initial modules in the Compassionate Clinical Care Program, and this means that we're welcoming a new cohort of interns. So welcome. We're really excited to get started, and we will jump right in. Ultimately, what the governmental regulations of HIPAA and HITECH, which are both acronyms that have to do with federal laws regarding patient information, ultimately what those two acronyms boil down to are that patients have the right to privacy and confidentiality. And here at Breastfeed Atlanta, we hold that right to the utmost regard. If you have a license or healthcare experience, you're probably already extremely familiar with HIPAA. But if you don't, we want to make sure that you're on the same footing as all of the other interns with understanding how important this right of privacy and confidentiality is at Breastfeed Atlanta, but also how you can put this into place with the care that you give and the role that you provide at Breastfeed Atlanta. And so therefore this is valuable to even those of you who are extremely experienced with HIPAA. In protecting patients' privacy, you want to always use a private place for case discussion and consultation, patient examination, and treatment. What that means, practically speaking, is that you may have to put a little effort into lowering your voice, moving closer to a patient, kind of indicating that you should have a conversation a little bit further away from the partitions because our partitions are fabric and are not soundproof. So you want to just do your best and provide a reasonable effort to protect patient privacy. But you also want to speak up about why you're doing things. It's extremely important that if you are hesitating outside a curtain before you walk into a space to obtain a clinical supply, for instance, that you speak up and say, "Hi, I'm waiting here for your permission to enter because I respect your privacy." Speak up and say that. Or if you enter a space and you're pulling the curtain behind someone, say, "I'm pulling this curtain for your privacy." If you want to address a parent about something that's going on with their baby, always make sure that you ask, "Are you okay with me discussing this information in front of anybody that you have brought with you?" I ask because it's important we respect your privacy. And again, it's important to say those things because miscommunications can occur. I've had a situation in a previous hospital scenario with a colleague who got in trouble because someone had complained that she was rude and never wanted to see them as a patient. And essentially, in kind of investigating the story and figuring out what was going on, was that my colleague had consistently walked over and closed the curtain. That this man had kept, kind of opening the curtain so they could see the busyness of the nurse's station, and so the patient had the curtain open, and the nurse would keep coming back and closing the curtain. And the patient eventually complained because they thought that the nurse was not wanting to see them or was being difficult or was trying to ignore them. Of course, the nurse was trying to protect the patient's privacy, but because she didn't say that, there was room for miscommunication. Rather than simply asking the grandparent or someone else who might be accompanying the parents to a visit to step out, you need to verbalize, "For your privacy, we like to speak just to the parents, but we are open to what you would like if you'd like to discuss the care of your child in front of others. But again, it's that importance of being specific and saying why we're doing the things that we're doing. PHI is an acronym that you're going to become very familiar with. It stands for Protected Health Information, and it refers to not only medical records, but also anything that could define or link to or identify medical records. And so that's really important because we want to use appropriate patient identifiers, but we also want to make sure that we are not providing what we may consider non-medical information to people who don't have the right to use it, because it may be able to be linked back to medical information or connect up and allow medical records or identification to be identified. And so we want to be very protective of any information that we provide. And in general, when answering queries, if somebody said, hey, is Johnny or Keisha a patient there? I just needed to verify that they were seen. That we don't just answer the phone. Oh yeah, we saw little Johnny's adorable last week. Or no, Keisha's not a patient here. We've never seen her. That is not information that you should just freely provide over the phone, for instance. Our standard responses should be that we don't provide patient information without disclosures or releases or at the specific request of patients. And that's always going to cover you, even if the information they were seeking was not something that would have been subject to HIPAA or to HITECH. It's going to be a higher standard of care, and it's going to cover you if you just don't share that information. Another acronym that's going to be really common that we use with HIPAA alongside PHI is TPO, which is Treatment, Payment, and Operations. So that brings us to kind of the second bullet point on the slide here, where it says that a patient's medical records may be shared with clinicians directly involved in the patient's case. That would be the treatment side of things. It is important to note that it's not all clinicians that work at Breastfeed Atlanta. It's clinicians that are directly involved in the patient's case. The next one would be regulatory agents looking into a facility's quality of care. That would fall under the O, the operations. Collecting quality data would also fall under kind of the operational standpoint. If you're looking at our records and trying to determine when was a patient checked in and how long did they wait to be seen, that kind of metric and data is related to the operations of our clinic. And so therefore would be covered under TPO. And of course, payment, releasing information about diagnoses and diagnosis codes, and the records to support those diagnoses go hand in hand with seeking to be paid by insurance companies and the like. And that kind of falls under, again, those other people with a legal or regulatory right to see records. The last thing on this slide says that only authorized employees should have access to areas where medical records are stored. And that was way easier to do when we lived in the era of paper records. We would have, paper records and file cabinets, and you could lock the file cabinet and you could lock the office door, and there's double layers of locks, and that's considered safe, right? But that's not the reality of how we provide care or access records nowadays. So with that same kind of idea of double lock, any device that has patient information on it, the app itself, like for instance on my phone I have the Acuity app, the app itself should be password protected, and then my device should be password protected. And you want to be cautious about that, especially if you share your device, if you hand it to your kids and let them watch videos or anything like that, because there was a case where someone left their laptop in a Starbucks and they were considered to have violated HIPAA even though the laptop was password protected because that was not a stringent enough protection when it was allowed to be in the hands of non-authorized users. The idea that they could easily hack or work around that password or that initial protection. And it's the same kind of thing. If you hand your child your phone and you've already opened it up for them, right? So that then that is not 2 layers of lock. It's just the one layer, the one password on the app itself. So my suggestion is that that's a routine way that you use your device, that you not download or use any Breastfeed Atlanta applications on your personal device. The exception for that is one where you can upload documents to Athena, our electronic medical record, because that app does not actually store any of the information within the app. It's simply essentially a camera. So that's when you could use your personal phone for. Or if you have a phone or a device that you could dedicate to work, to Breastfeed Atlanta, that would also be an option. Otherwise, we have the devices and phones that you can use and kind of assign to yourself every day when you arrive at work. And we can use those to access medical records. As a reminder, you should keep those devices on your person, and you should speak up as to why you are carrying them with you. It's pretty common that we will have our notebooks, and you will have it in the staff area, but then you can also take it out to one of the exam room areas, and you may need to just pop back into the staff area to pick up a printout or something. Do not leave your device with the patients in the patient area, but do speak up and say, I'm keeping your medical information with me as part of our privacy and confidentiality policy. We protect our medical records, right? So that way the patient's not concerned that you don't want to leave your phone or your laptop or your tablet with them for any reason other than you are being proactive about privacy and confidentiality. So again, the HIPAA privacy rule is a federal regulation, and it's fairly simple to remain in compliance. You just don't share patient information unless you need to. They have to be, follow that TPO rule. Are they treating the patient directly? Are they involved with payment or operations? The other part of it is, don't leave patient information. We do have some things that are written out on paper. Keep them on you. Protect them from being seen. Don't leave information, on a desk where someone who's not involved with the patient's care can access it. Don't leave it in the clinic room, like next to the scale where the next patient could come and see it when they're weighing their baby. So you want to be aware of that, because not only is that important for our standards of privacy and confidentiality for patients, it also protects our reputation as a healthcare provider and protects our financial interests, because HIPAA has some pretty severe civil and criminal penalties. So we want to avoid that. We want to remain in compliance. And just being observant of your surroundings. Again, we talked earlier, it's a little bit hard to maintain confidentiality when you're just on the other side of a curtain or a fabric barrier. But being aware of that, lowering your voice, getting closer to the patient, stepping further away from the barrier, just being observant is part of that reasonable standard of care. Patient confidentiality, while extremely important, is not absolute. We at Breastfeed Atlanta do screen for postpartum mental health, anxiety, and depression concerns. We do see vulnerable populations, new parents, infants. We are mandated reporters should we suspect any abuse. And with that mandated reporting, that would be a situation in which we are not bound to patient confidentiality. If there is a conflict between the ethical duty to allowing a patient autonomy and the right to control their own health information and non-maleficence, which is the concern that the patient may be harmful to themselves or to others, then we have a duty as clinicians to breach confidentiality. But you would never want to take that lightly. Always take it up the chain of command, ask the clinical manager, ask the intern should ask me, the residency director. We can all ask Christy, the executive director. Take it up the chain of command if you feel like there's some information that you should reveal, that you're duty bound to reveal about a patient. But ideally, if it's possible, you could talk to the patient first and say, this answer on the Edinburgh scale is concerning to me. Do you mind if I share this information with your OB or another resource that we are going to provide in order to help the patient get care, for instance? So if they give their consent to that disclosure, then it is not a breach of confidentiality. However, even if they refuse to give consent, you may still be compelled to reveal the information if it meets the state and federal guidelines for disclosing this information. A core value at Breastfeed Atlanta is that we provide fair and equitable care. Part of this equitable care is the fact that discrimination is prohibited. Some of these prohibitions are codified into law, but not all of them are. However, here at Breastfeed Atlanta, it is expressly stated that discrimination is prohibited regardless of race and ethnicity, national origin, religion, political affiliation, level of education, their place of residence, their place of business, age, gender, marital status, parental status, personal appearance, physical or mental disability, sexual orientation, genetic information, or the source of payment. I'm extremely proud to say that at Breastfeed Atlanta, we have diversity across every single one of those bullet points. And this is a workplace where discrimination is prohibited and diversity and inclusion is valued and equitable care is prized. And so that's extremely important, that in no way should any of our actions violate this core value or this tenet. And that sums up our initial module on HIPAA, patient privacy, and compliance. I look forward to seeing you at the next class.